I'm actually very curious to see how good the other classes would be in this challenge, and which jobs would provide the best advantage. But I don't think I'm gonna check that out for myself anytime soon. I am back on my bullshit. Okay, so I may have lied, may have exaggerated a bit. At this point, you may be asking, why I'm even doing this to myself? And my answer is, I have absolutely no idea. I have to be really honest with you and admit that I may have become unironically addicted to the blunt force trauma challenge. But even I am still not addicted enough to fully repeat the same process again. Fortunately, there is a way for me to have the microdose of this challenge, and that is Vandar. In case you're new here, the Dragon Nest Blunt Force Trauma is a challenge where I have to get to level 99, but I'm only allowed to use passive skills, and I'm not allowed to use skills starting first specialization to deal damage. If you watched my previous video, and if not, I would really appreciate if you did, then you might remember me saying that when picking a class to do this challenge with, I'm definitely not picking Vandar, because he would make this challenge way too easy. But ever since finishing my original run, I could not stop thinking just how much easier would he actually be. The main reason Vandar has his own separate category is because unlike literally any other class, you will have to gain only 9 levels compared to the usual 99. And I don't think I need to tell you why one number is bigger than the other. And because this experience is so different, I became really curious as to how that would affect blunt force trauma. Another reason I thought this challenge would be fun is because I have a very interesting relationship with this character, to say the least.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass
Objects that I've shoved up my ass.
And no, I'm not doing this just because I wanted to look at Kyle again. Okay, maybe a little. Anyway, the rule set will be mostly the same one I created for the previous run, with the exception of a few changes. First up, I didn't bother with creating a new account and just decided to do this on the same one I completed the previous challenge on. My reason is that while I was raising a Lancia on my main account, I've noticed that even though I had 2 characters of max level on that account, the EXP bonus was practically non-existent. Legit, I'm positive about this because my Lancia learned level 99 literally on the exact same quest my blunt force trauma ended. And my second reason is that I was too lazy to create a third account. There, I admit it. Another edit I added is regarding the Gas Dragon buff. Since the reason I banned it was because you weren't supposed to be in Red Lotus Palace until way later in the main quest. But now, since Vandar actually spawns in Red Lotus, the rules are inversed, aka no Saint Haven buffs this time. And finally, Vandar is such a special boy that he has yet another quirk affecting the rules. Remember how I was surprised by the newbie guide ring, which gives you run changing stats? Well, as far as I know, Vandar is the only class who has immediate access to a second ring with the exact same stats, so he can get double the benefit. And, of course, I'm not allowing that. Sorry, but you'll have to take off Kyle's engagement ring for a while. With this, we get the complete edited rule set. I don't think it would be necessary to add any new rules down the line. Now, I hope Vandar won't disappoint us, because it's time to get the second part of the full blunt force trauma experience.
Wake your ass up, because it's time to go beast mode.
Unlike my previous run, this time I actually remembered how to remove my skills from the quick slot bar, so I started by doing that. I think Kyle was upset that Vandar wasn't putting on the ring because his graphics looked different from how I remembered them. I've seen him do this 50 billion times, trust me. Nah, for real though. Why does it look like bro's hand is full of squid ink spaghetti? Anyway, after kissing my main man goodbye, I proceeded to the mandatory unskippable cutscene haul. By the way, Why won't they ever fix their dialogue boxes like, bruh, what is this? This entire section doesn't really matter. The only thing worthy of note is my first ever battle. And all I'm gonna say is that it's definitely the easiest battle of the entire run. Anyway, after having our clothes taken by Freaking Art, the real game can finally start. Unlike the other classes, this time we won't be traveling to any other towns and we're basically stuck in Red Lotus, because I genuinely don't think we'll have to play long enough to get to Mila Laurel. By the way, kinda an unrelated tangent, but I honestly never expected Identity would ever release another town after Red Lotus Palace. A while ago, I actually wanted to make a post along the lines of why I think Identity would never make another town, and now I'm glad that I procrastinated on that. Otherwise, that statement would have aged like milk. Like, the only reason Red Lotus even exists is so that the players won't have to go on a 3-hour trip anytime they need to go to Mistland. And adding new towns would just expand the list of irrelevant places along with Lotus Marsh. But honestly, I'm kinda glad that they added Mila Laurel, because otherwise the trip to the new Anu Arundel dungeons would also be 3 hours. Sorry, what was I even doing? Oh, that's right. Blindforce trauma. I got my drape back from the newbie guide, and for once, I'm not upset that I don't have a cash shop costume, because Vandar somehow got the best default drape in the entire game. Kyle really went all in for this one. One annoying thing I've noticed is that at the beginning the game found literally any occasion to remove my quick slot potion setup for absolutely no reason. I don't remember if this also happens with skills, but was this really necessary? Talking about skills, it's time for the Blindforce Trauma Allowed Skills tier list, Wonder Edition. And after looking over my skills, it didn't take me long to realize that most of them were basically Wander's take on the skills I ranked in the Sorceress run. Picking is Slap Attack, Power Dive is Hammer Strike, Candelabra is Poor Kick, Double Check is Heal Attack, and Windmill is Counterspell. One thing of note though, is that despite these skills functioning exactly the same, Wander's skills have a noticeably higher attack scaling. Well, besides Double Check. You think this means that I will simply place all these skills in the same tiers, right? Well, despite these skills having the exact same functions and activating in the exact same way, they do have very subtle differences, which become quite crucial in Blindforce Trauma. The biggest differences I've noted were regarding Special Attack and Power Dive. As I've discovered during my previous run, Sorceress is the only class who can increase the speed of her special attack, which automatically makes it better. However, Wander's special attack is connected to one of his other skills that we'll talk about a bit later. So, let's cover Power Dive. Although it looks and it is very fun to use, I quickly noticed that despite having better scaling, it somehow performed worse than Hammer Strike. And as someone who cleared out entire dungeons using Hammer Strike before, I knew that I wasn't just hallucinating. So I went off to examine both of these skills in my editing software. And what I discovered was that the animation for Hammer Strike lasts 1.5 seconds, while the animation for Power Dive lasts 1.19 seconds. And while you may think that a 14 millisecond difference is nothing, boy, does it become noticeable in this challenge. The biggest time loss happens because, instead of immediately plunging like Sorceress, Vandar stays in the air for a moment longer. But not only that, his landing animation also takes more time. And all this not only causes DPS loss in a challenge where even the smallest decrease in damage becomes quite impactful, it also made Vandar's attack more susceptible to interruption. During my entire Blindforce Trauma run, I don't think I've ever seen my Hammer Strike be interrupted while I'm in the air. Ever. This, however, happened with Power Dive multiple times. And considering that this skill has the exact same scaling than just our special attack, I had even less incentive using it. Oh, and remember how Hammer Strike was actually a good way to stun enemies? Well, the same could not be said about Power Dive. I don't know if this is just because the dungeons are high level or not, but I had more luck stunning enemies with my arrow skills than this one. Because of all this, Power Dive is being demoted all the way from B tier to C tier. I must also admit that I'll change the placement for double check. Honestly, the only reason I even put heal attack in A was because of its high damage scaling, and honestly because I didn't have a better skill to fill the A tier with. Playing as Vandar just reminded me how mid the skill actually is. Not only does using it rely on knocking down the enemy first, which becomes a rare occurrence in high level dungeons, but also for some reason, I even had a hard time activating it, even when the enemy was knocked down. Here you can see that I'm trying to use double check, but my Vandar chooses to use his special attack like a goddamn idiot he is. So, because of this, double check goes all the way into D tier. Okay. Now it's time to talk about the one original skill Vandar has, Hammer Slam. To activate it, all you have to do is double right click and Vandar will bitch slap the ground in front of him. I bet someone wishes he would be slapping them instead. Anyway, this skill was basically my main source of DPS. Not only because of the good attack scaling, but also because it was easier to use compared to Power Dive. But you have no idea how conflicted I am about the ranking of this skill. Because if I had any other means of consistent DPS, it would be placed lower. But since my options are very limited, I think I will have to leave it in A. As you can see, compared to Sorceress, the skill quality has plummeted significantly. And the only thing compensating for that is the increased attack scaling of the skills. But this is just the base skills without the specialization, you might say. It can still get better. Well, I guess we'll see. Because before we even got a dungeon to go to, we already got our first job specialization. Yeah, just like that. Before actually making my choice though, first I wanted to study my options. So I went on the Divinitor Minerva. This website is genuinely a good resource to look up Dragon Nest skills, items and so on. Although normal players definitely don't use it for shit like this. Not sponsored, by the way. But when I went there, I saw that for some reason they still didn't update the website to add Vandar's second job, even though it's been like at least half a year already since it's been out. And when I tried to see if their Korean or Southeast Asian database had it, I was met with this. Anyway, this meant that I could only look up Treasure Hunter, and what I saw wasn't very good for me. According to the rules, passive skills that deal damage aren't allowed starting first specialization. But as you can see, all Treasure Hunter passives are damage dealing. Because of this, even though I had absolutely no clue what was waiting for me in his other job, I picked Wanderer. And at that moment, I realized that during my main Blunt Force trauma run, I underestimated Sorceress. A lot. First of all, because she has access to Force Shield, which may as well be the best passive skill for this challenge. But secondly, because she has a ranged attack in the form of Charge Missile. And although using Charge Missile feels like having to raw dog the first 2 days of your period without any painkillers, it does have a few niche uses where it becomes your best option, especially in the high level areas. Compared to that, Vandar has jack shit. Out of the entire Wanderer skill tree, the 2 skills available to me are Broadsword Mastery and Weak Wind. And honestly, I don't have much to say about any of them. Broadsword Mastery is just a stat stick, giving you 15% attack with 10% crit and crit damage, which is a nice bonus to have, but that's it. It doesn't even compare to something like Force Shield, so I have to put it in C. And Weak Wind is, well, it exists. Basically, this skill is too many inputs to do something that isn't even that useful. The regular dash or sidestep were plenty for dodging any attack, so I honestly don't even know why this skill is even a thing. The only time this skill actually becomes good is in one specific dungeon. Other than that, don't even bother. Immediate F. So, as you can see, my skill situation is pretty dire right now. I don't even have a single skill I could put in the S tier without overdosing on copium. That's how bad it is. This is probably the most cursed Vandar build you'll ever see. And they cleared my quick slot again, goddammit. When going into the Vandar run, I had no idea just how lore accurate this playthrough would actually be. Before going anywhere, I wanted to buy some more potions, but then... Just think... Wait, what? Oh, I don't have any money, I'm fucking broke, that's why. Yeah, now that's canon Vandar experience. After realizing just how limited my skill set was, I didn't have high hopes when entering my first dungeon. Still, I wasn't too worried, because it would still take me a few dungeons to unlock the Abyss difficulty. But let me just tell you how greatly I underestimated this challenge. Since this was still just the normal difficulty, and literally my first ever dungeon of the run, I thought it would be just as easy as the start of the normal Blunt Force trauma. But my HP bar felt the level 90 dungeon almost immediately. And of course, I was blessed with a raider as soon as I entered. Great, just great. What also didn't make things easier was the fact that I was thrown into the fight with my starter equipment, still with literally no helmet. I think my Vandar is actually gonna get Blunt Force trauma after this one. And because the only attacks I had were melee, and I had absolutely zero defensive skills, my health began to drain almost immediately.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?
Yes, I am feeling it, SpongeBob. One thing I never realized about this dungeon before is that it's basically a mini boss collection leading up to the main boss. This place has 3 of them, and the last one was honestly the worst. Which is not that surprising because you literally have to fight a cock. At this point, the dungeons turned into the right-clicking simulator. I would still try to use power die from time to time, but would shortly give up. I'm gonna thank my previous run's experience for this. But somehow I managed to last without dying until getting to the main boss. And if I compare my experience here, this normal difficulty dungeon felt the same as the Abyss difficulty at the start of Saint Haven. And if you remember, this was the point where the true challenge only began. Still, the fact that I died on my first ever boss wasn't a sign of good things to come. Especially if you consider the fact that it took me quite a few Saint Haven dungeons to experience my first ever death. But one thing I've noticed, as I'm writing this after a few dungeons in, is that the dungeon bosses are actually not that bad. If you take this one for example, you can see that most of her attacks come with a warning, and that trend carries over to many other dungeons. If you come back to my least favorite dungeons in the main run, you can pick out that the bosses that I hate the most have either bullshit moves, brass status effects, attacks that come without a warning, and attacks that are almost if not impossible to dodge. So far, I've encountered nothing like that in here. How the hell are enemies in Mistland better than the enemies in Legendia? Anyway, my first ever dungeon took me 16 minutes to complete, which would definitely scare me if I didn't experience way worse things before. Luckily, upon returning to town, I was rewarded with 20 revival scrolls, which was great, because I realized I'd need them way earlier than I usually would. This was also the moment where I realized I need to buy armor before I do anything else. I know last time I said that you shouldn't buy weapons from the blacksmith, but this is a special case. I also wanted to sharpen my gear, but... Oh, that's right, I'm broke. Needless to say, I did not sharpen my gear. After that, I went off to invest my remaining blood, sweat and tears into more revival scrolls. For some reason, the server didn't translate the ticket agent's lines to English, so I accidentally teleported myself to Radames instead of Merca. Well, good thing this isn't a speedrun. When I finally reached Merca, I was about to go into my next dungeon when... This is not a base issue. I will not, in fact, be fine. Yes, I realized that after the last dungeon, I only had 4 potions in total left. So I had to teleport my ass all the way back to Red Lotus and invest all my newfound gold into potions. But in the moment I didn't even realize what I just did. Oh, that's right, I'm broke. Yes, after spending literally all my money on potions, I couldn't even afford a fucking bus ticket. This challenge is truly lore accurate. Anyway, this meant that I had to drag myself all the way back to Merca on foot. At this point, you may also be wondering if I'm still punishing myself for the last time since I'm not using a mount. No, this time the reason I don't use a mount is because I never actually liked using mounts, to be honest. This might be a piping hot take, but I just don't like mounts even if they look good, that's it. This applies not only to Dragoness but to any game. The only reason I use them is because I have no choice if I don't want to wait 50 billion years to get from point A to point B. Why don't I like mounts? I just don't like how they look. I enjoy just looking at my characters walking and running, that's it. I don't know, mounts are just kinda too visually overwhelming and unnecessary for me, if you know what I mean. I'm sorry, where was I? Right, Blue Wind Plains. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the shortest Merca dungeon, so that was certainly a bonus. One thing to note is that in the first couple parts, you should try your best to stay away from the tents, otherwise more enemies will spawn from them. Everything else until the boss isn't really worth mentioning. Besides this owl being called the Crow for some goddamn reason. The good thing about not having charged missile is that I won't have to worry about this boss having fire attacks. Although that might be the only saving grace. Something I've noticed about Merca dungeons is that the bosses will often just stare at you not doing anything and giving you plenty of time to damage them. Although that's certainly weird, I am not complaining. This boss also has attack indicators, so just look out for them and you'll be fine. Most of the time. After everything I've been through, I honestly don't have much to say about these bosses. The most interesting moment here happened when the boss was at 0% HP but still alive for some reason. This dungeon only took me 7 minutes, which is given late Keldrock. And yes, I was so broke that I couldn't even repair my armor right after the dungeon. What I didn't expect, however, was receiving 20 more revival scrolls after returning to town. This surprised me, considering I only ever got 23 ones throughout my entire Blandford Stroma playthrough. But now I got whole 40. Does this game know what kind of run I'm doing? My next stop was Broken Goldstone Canyon, and this is where the bullshit factor started to ramp up. As soon as you enter the dungeon, your ass will be blasted by these cannons from the top of the cliff. But the catch is, you can't get to them until you kill this batch of enemies first. And when you do, there's another set of canyons waiting for you at an even higher cliff. This was also the dungeon that once again reminded me how good it was to actually have Force Shield. Without it, my only option for healing were these goddamn 120 cooldown potions, and the remainder of the newbie guide ones I was saving for the particularly extreme cases. So a lot of the time I would just be standing there waiting for my potions to let me heal. This is truly peak gameplay right here. At some point I just stopped caring about not dying and began relying on revives more often. Because this just ain't it. Now to the boss. Honestly, I feel like the minions around the boss were unironically dealing more damage than the boss itself, so my priority was getting rid of them first. Not gonna lie, this boss was pretty tanky, but overall easy as fuck. Like the previous one, it also had a staring problem. I feel like the reason they do that is because they honestly cannot believe my dumbass is basically just hitting them with my bare fist. This boss also has something I call the Oogly Boogly attack, and I think it has to be the funniest shit I've ever seen a boss do in this game. Overall, so far, this was the dungeon where I died the most, which was 3 times. It's definitely not up in the rankings of my death counter, but the difficulty is certainly increasing. Nah bruh, who left the rose toy up in here? I must admit, the most annoying part so far was going back to the city to put on all my new heraldries I got for completing a dungeon. Talking about them, I forgot skill heraldries exist. Again, I swear, this happens to me literally every time I play this game. Luckily, this time I did have enough money to buy everything I needed. Again, this was also a very convenient time for me to remember about skill heraldries, because in the dungeon that followed right after, I finally unlocked the Abyss difficulty. The best way I can describe this dungeon is... Yeah, if you thought that the broken Goldstone Canyon had too many cannons, this dungeon saw it and basically said, nah, hold my Glock, because they legit pulled out the whole artillery up in this bitch. Without a doubt, this is the most American dungeon in the entire game, because it perfectly simulates how it feels like to be bombed by the US forces in World War II. For some reason, I thought that killing this mini-boss would get rid of the tanks as well. Looking back, I don't know why I remember it like that, but that's not what happened, which meant that I was letting myself get blasted for nothing. I always find it funny how, according to the main quest, you're supposed to be sneaky in here, while at the same time apparently having to defeat this whole US army troop. Like, ain't no way these two wouldn't have seen me doing this.
Must have been the wind.
Talking about the main quest, this is actually the part where I could already leave the dungeon. But guess what? I decided not to. Why? Because I actually wanted the challenge to be challenging. And also because Vandar edition is gonna be short as fuck anyway, so might as well. Another reason I didn't leave was because I was genuinely curious as to how well Vandar would do at defeating a boss on Abyss. And well, if the whole dungeon up to this point didn't convince you that it's American, the boss certainly will. Honestly, I'm glad I decided to complete this dungeon, because it was honestly fun as hell. I'm really glad that Identity finally figured out how to make good bosses, even though it took them until like cap 90, but still. What can I say? The boss kept you engaged, but not in the I wanna punch a hole through my screen way. You don't have to guess where her attack came from, and most importantly, funny cowboy hat and gun. Because Vandar is working for Kyle, who might as well be the most British looking dragon-ness motherfucker I've ever seen. British? The entire fight I kept laughing to myself because I began to imagine it as America versus England. Although this might be footage from an alternative timeline because the British won this battle and I don't know how to feel about that. Somehow the entire dungeon took me only 23 minutes, which I would say was a long time, if I didn't know any better. This was also the dungeon with the most deaths so far. We went from 3 in the previous dungeon, all the way to 10, which is certainly quite a leap. So after that, I went to invest into revival scrolls again. Because the unnamed Tyrant Tomb incident made me too paranoid to go into a dungeon without at least 20 revives on me. Now, I was actually looking forward to the next part of the quest, because this is where Vandar's first scripted dragon fight was supposed to happen. And if you watched my previous run, you already know how the mandatory dragon fight goes through the other classes. I'm sorry, what? So I was really curious if the same bullshit would happen here or not. Because I remember when playing as Vandar normally, the dragon fight actually took more than 2 clicks for once. So I was wondering if we'll keep that spirit. But before we go, can anyone please tell me which of the settings makes my effects look like absolute shit? I already put them on normal and it still looks like that. I refuse to believe that my 20-year-old laptop could support better graphics, so please help me fix this. So anyway, the fight is still locked on easy, but guess what? This time, they actually let me fight the fucking dragon, all by myself. And this is actually a legit fight. They don't even give you any bullshit buff that basically make you invincible. Although I tested it and quickly realized that the fight was still so easy that you have to actively try to actually get killed during this. Like, I'm pretty sure you can still finish this fight on Blunt Force Trauma without even dodging once, and your HP will still be above 90%. I would love if this fight had at least some stakes, but at this point, I'm glad they didn't just leave us Mammon's dead body on a silver platter. Yes, the bar is literally in hell. This just goes to show how unnecessary all the bullshit they did with the Sea Dragon fight was. See, was it really that hard not to disrespect your player's ability from the very start? After defeating one of the least relevant dragons in the entire game, you are rewarded with your second specialization. And this is where I had to pause. Since the Divinity Minerva was basically abandoned by its creator, and Google wasn't giving me what I needed either, I had to do my own research. I literally had to go back to my main account, create 2 Vandars, and study the 2 different jobs that way.
It's been a year, Daddy. I really miss you. Mommy says you went to the store to get milk.
Anyway, the result of my research was this. In both jobs, the second class master gives you a 30% physical attack increase. However, the difference lies in the first class mastery. The Maverick path gives you 30% strength and 20% fire attack, but Revenant gives you a whopping 50% strength increase. Considering fire damage bonus would do jack shit in my situation, the choice became obvious. I received even more rewards shortly after that. The main one, of course, being the Grimace Shakes. But what I quickly realized is that in the normal playthrough you get 100 of them, while Vandar only gets 50 for some reason. I mean, fuck him too, but damn. Oh yeah, I can also floss now.
Move! If you guys know it, just move. So I want to see some movement. I'm not seeing enough movement.
Also, is it just me, or why does it feel like I almost always get the blue hair dye in these boxes? At that point, the game decided I had enough fun for a while, and sent me to the ancient Chiron city. Remember how I said that the Red Lotus Palace Garden is basically a mini-boss collection? Well, I guess at some point someone decided to double it and give it to the next person, because here they introduced 2 mini-bosses at once, and wasn't really a big fan of that. But at the same time, single bosses were also a thing. So this entire dungeon was just basically a mini boss fest. And I honestly can't tell which ones were the most annoying to deal with. It has to be a tie between the golems and the elephants. Remember how I said it took Identity until Cap 90 to figure out how to make good bosses? So I guess they still didn't figure that out while making this part of Murka. Because so far, this was the most annoying boss I had to deal with in the Vandar run. When I was talking about the weak wind skill, I said that there is only one dungeon this skill is actually good in. And this is the one exact moment where it is. You see, this particular boss has this one attack, which, not only has an unnecessarily huge radius, but also gives you like a second or two to react. So Weak Wind becomes the best and low-key the only way to evade this. Literally anyone other than Vandar can go fuck themselves, I guess. The redeeming part about this boss is that at least his other attacks don't have the same bullshit factor. When he starts crawling around like the Goo Goo Gaga baby, all you have to do is just run away. And when he starts throwing the tennis balls, hide in a corner as far away as possible. This dungeon honestly felt like it lasted at least an hour, so I was absolutely gobsmacked when I learned that it only took me 19 minutes. I genuinely couldn't believe that this bullshit was shorter than the Red Waste. This just shows me how much an enjoyable boss makes the time fly. This dungeon would actually have been my last, if this video took place when the cap was still 95. So y'all have to bear with me for a bit longer. My next stop was Chiron Beach, and this is where I must admit that I did not complete this dungeon. Because I just had to deal with the ancient city, and the moment I saw the boss from this dungeon, my mind filled with flashbacks. Yeah, having to give Kanna flowers is torture enough, so I just left the moment the quest allowed me to.
What's wrong? What happened after that?
But don't worry, I'll make it up to you in the next dungeon, Phantom Forest Core. And although this dungeon also had the buy one mini-boss get two for free, for some reason they were much more manageable than the ancient city. Maybe I got better gear by that point. Never mind, I take that back. The golems are still assholes. The entire dungeon leading up to the boss was pretty mid, so I'm not gonna comment on that. But before the boss battle comes fight with Grell. And usually this is the moment where you just one-tap him, but this time we truly gave him blunt force trauma. And I have to say that this challenge made the Grell fight hilarious. Because you literally have to beat the shit out of a child with your bare hands. This quest was truly sponsored by Rubinar. After whooping Grell's ass into oblivion, technically I didn't even have to fight the boss and could actually live. But since I skipped the one in the last dungeon, and I was already at the end anyway, I decided to make it up to you like I promised and complete it. And I honestly wish I didn't. I never liked this boss, so I already knew it would be ass. But it was an even smellier ass than I anticipated. If I thought that the ancient city boss was annoying, this bitch doesn't even compare. First up, say what you will about the ancient city one, but at least he didn't have any goddamn minions with it. But they're the most manageable part. With how much this asshole was jumping around, he honestly gave me flashbacks to the Dragon Follower base, which is never a good thing. And let me just explain why I don't like when the bosses do that. First of all, because it makes them unnecessarily harder to actually hit. But second of all, is because all the hyperactive bosses have an Enderman problem. Yeah, I've noticed this as a consistent trait for all the bosses who can't stay in place for one fucking second. The game will register them landing or doing a move before teleporting them in a completely opposite corner for no reason. However, I don't say that a boss has to be mostly static in order to be good, because there is actually a good jumping boss in the Red Waste. You know, you may think that me doing the Vandar version of Blunt Force Trauma was unnecessary, but this challenge actually made me think about what makes a bad dungeon boss and a good dungeon boss. So I made this list. I'm not gonna go into detail about every point right now, but do let me know if you'd like me to make a separate video about this. Anyway, right now I'm going to use this list to demonstrate my point as to why this particular boss is absolute doo-doo caca. As you can see, it hits 2 entries on my bad boss list, too much movement and also impossible to dodge attacks. I must elaborate that when I said Weak Wind is only useful in the ancient city, I said that because Phantom Forest Core is technically optional in the run. This boss also has a bullshit attack where Weak Wind becomes the best option to evade. However, what also makes his attacks impossible to dodge at times is again, the Enderman problem. What?
お前はもう死んでいる。
Nah, bruh. Bro literally pulled the teleports behind you move and expected us to be okay with it. I also absolutely loved this attack, which hit me even though I wasn't even in the indicated hit radius. Why even have it at this point if you're gonna pull this bullshit on me anyway? This boss was actually teleporting so much that I genuinely couldn't tell if this was intentional or not. That's how fucking ridiculous it was. And if it really was intended, then why the hell would they even make a mechanic that is indistinguishable from a common ping bug in the first place? This fight was so bad, it felt like it actually dragged on for hours. Now, I'm just gonna assume that you weren't paying attention to the clock in the corner and ask you to guess how long this whole dungeon actually took me. I give you 5 seconds to place your bets. Okay, now here's the answer. It still took only 16 minutes! What the fuck? How is it only 16 minutes? I don't get it. Yes, I genuinely don't understand how the fuck this dungeon took me even shorter than the ancient city. And that was short as well. Who is... What? 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 Bro, you good? I knew the next dungeon is gonna be special, because it would be slightly altered by the story quest. I don't have much to say for most of it, but I did notice that for some reason this dungeon was suspiciously easy. Like it went from several deaths to no deaths. It even made me sus if I was actually playing on Abyss or not, but I was, so I don't know what was up with that. After that comes the part with the iconic Kyle cutscene. But, this is what happened instead. Wait, what? Where the fuck is Vandar? Why is he in... Oh, Kyle is visible. Where the fuck is Vandar? I would be fucking shocked too. I would be fucking floored too, Kyle, if Vandar became fucking invisible all of a sudden. What the fuck? Yeah, I have no clue what the hell happened here, or how that even happened. I swear, these Vandar cutscenes are different every time I watch them. So anyway, after you finish talking to Kyle, turns out you don't actually have to finish the dungeon, and just get teleported back to Murka. I guess Kyle just ate the fucking boss himself or something. If you were wondering, no, I do not count this dungeon as completed, because we didn't get the timer ending screen. I actually thought that this would be the last dungeon of the run, because this seemed like the perfect time for the story to split to next part, since this is where we leave Murka and go back to Red Lotus. But I guess the game had other plans. At that point, I genuinely felt like they were holding my max level hostage, because the amount of yapping I had to sit through before the next dungeon was diabolical. I even got the ugly ass scout costume and the rest of my 100 grimace shakes, which I also discovered don't stack, by the way, before I got level 99. By the way, the next dungeon is actually going to be the last this time. And what is this dungeon? Loser's Exile place. So this is the reward I get for completing this challenge, huh? And when I went there, I really started to think that the quest probably really did something to the Undergarden dungeon, because the difficulty spike compared to it became obvious. The moment you enter this area, you get your ass blasted so fucking bad. And this trend continues throughout the whole dungeon. My advice would be to get rid of these candle huts first, otherwise you'll be bombed into oblivion. But what's even worse than them are the kamikaze mice. I genuinely don't know how the fuck you're supposed to deal with these. Cause if you kill them, they blow up. And if you don't, guess what? They blow up too. This dungeon has 2 mini bosses, and the first one is kinda mid, so I don't have any comment about it, except for that it gives you this annoying slowness debuff. But the second one, man, why do these challenges always have to end on the worst ones possible? This New York Pizza Radmaster Splinter looking ass bitch takes the title of the absolute worst mini-boss of the entire run. This stinky bastard will keep throwing this awful toxic waste from the sewage, which almost constantly gives you these delay echo ASMR looking at visuals, which I'll certainly need after this experience. But if you thought that this was annoying, it also kept summoning the aforementioned asshole bomb mice and bats from the Goon Cave. Yeah, honestly, these mice were the ones who made this fight suck so bad. They definitely go on my worst enemies list. But I still hate these bastards more. I think Vandar himself hated that fight too, because after that he literally broke his arm.
That's what she said. And you know what? What was that?
I've noticed that for some reason the later stages of Vandar's story quest love making you go until almost the very end of the dungeon before you can actually leave, which is the exact same thing that happened here. But I still decided to fight the boss because if I ended the challenge like that, that would be low-key anticlimactic. And it's true that actually completing the dungeon made it more interesting. But did I enjoy the fight? No. My statement about Mistland bosses being better did not age at all. Genuinely, what the hell happened that we went from this to this? Can we please give the steering wheel back to whoever designed the Red Waste boss? Cause the dungeon quality had sunk like the Titanic. This is one of those bosses that has bees up his ass because he cannot stay still for 5 fucking seconds. It also had the exact same problem, where I legit couldn't tell if him teleporting was supposed to happen or not. I could maybe see the vision with that one electric boss doing that, because I am Speed Lightning McQueen bullshit or something like that. But not here. Like, why the fuck would he even do this? But then whatever psychopath designed this boss decided that he wasn't jumping all over the place like a bouncy ball on steroids enough. Now this moron gives himself this buff that lasts a whole minute, which makes this dumbass even more hyperactive. So the best thing you can do during this whole last minute is literally just run around and wait for the buff to disappear. At the very least. This buff doesn't give the boss insta-kill attacks, unlike in Dragon Follower base. But although I love to shit on that dungeon, one thing I will give credit for is that the buff didn't change the boss's attack pattern, so you could still dodge most of them, unlike with this asshole. When the buff finishes, the boss falls over and gives you time to attack, which would have made this diabolical buff mechanic actually good, if the boss didn't stay laying down for only like 2 seconds, and also didn't immediately attack while you're trying to take advantage of the fucking fight mechanic. Oh, and how could I forget that one time where he literally gives you a second to react to this move, but there is literally no space that you can even run to, so you have to jump. Yeah, can we please leave these types of bosses behind and start giving all of them like horse tranquilizers or something, because even the game can barely handle their bullshit. This dungeon took me 19.5 minutes, which I can actually believe this time. And on that note, the challenge is over. Yay! Compared to the 19.5 hours the regular Blunt Force Trauma took me, the Vandar version only took me 3 hours and 45 minutes. Now, I can finally answer the question I asked at the very start of this video, which was, how much easier is the Blunt Force Trauma challenge as Vandar compared to the other classes? Well, my answer is a lot. It's so ridiculously easy that it doesn't even compare. And it's not only because you have to gain 9 levels how I originally thought. No, there are a few other factors that make Vandar's version of this challenge video game journalist worthy. First up, the increased damage scaling of his basic skills. As I've already discussed in my available skills tier list, Vandar's Blunt Force Trauma skill set is absolute shit. However, the skills do make up for that with their ridiculous attack scaling. Let's just compare his special attack with Sorcerer's special attack for a second. But considering you're only gonna use his special attack in a combo with Hammer Slam, this number becomes even higher. I'm pretty sure the reason for that is because Vandar starts out with dungeons of much higher level than the rest of the classes. So while my Sorceress was dealing 110% of damage in like 50 level cap dungeons, Vandar had a much easier time. I think this was also the main reason the dungeons took me roughly 15 to 20 minutes, which is definitely much longer than if you're playing like a normal person, but in Blunt Force Trauma that is literally nothing. The next factor was less significant, but still had a place in making things easier. Faster quest rewards. In my normal challenge, it took me all the way until the end of Saint Haven to get the very useful Grimace Shakes Orpal potions, whereas Vandar got them quite early on. Now that I think about it, that's kinda bullshit. They could have made it so the rest of the classes also get 50 of them at like the start of Saint Haven, and get the rest at the end. And also, why does his ass get 40 revives while everyone else only gets 20? Did somebody donate their 20 spare reviver skulls to the homeless shelter? Like, get the fuck out of here. And lastly, what I think the main reason why this challenge was so easy is the dungeons. Because up until now, there was something I haven't pointed out directly, but you may have picked up on it yourself, and that is the fact that as Vandar, there is only one dungeon that you have to complete until the end on Abyss. Yes, the other dungeons you had to finish way before you actually unlock the Abyss difficulty, and in the rest you could safely leave when the quest says you can. There were also no repeats, so there wasn't even an incentive to complete dungeons anyway. The only reason I actually completed most dungeons was to make this video, like, that's it. And the only reason I didn't complete this particular one was because I hate that fucking One Piece looking motherfucker with a burning passion, and there is nothing you can do to make me deal with it willingly. But if I left the dungeon every time I was allowed to, then this challenge would have taken me shorter than 3 hours. I think I was right on the money when I called Vandar the trial version of the Blunt Force Trauma run. The biggest challenge was being broke at the very start, like, that's it. Actually, the very first dungeon is legit the hardest part, because if you are not careful with your potions and revives, you can literally get soft locked because you won't have any money to get potions and you won't have enough resources to proceed. But I don't know, maybe the only reason the Vandar version seems so easy to me is because I already seen the Eldritch Horrors. I actually wonder how I would describe it if this was my first time experiencing something like this. With how quick and relatively painless this challenge is, I would actually recommend it if you wanted to raise a Vandar. And you're also bored as hell. And guess what? This time you don't actually have to hate yourself to participate. As for me though, I think this is where I'll be taking a break from Dragon Nest challenges for a while. I don't think anything could even compare to the original Blunt Force Trauma anyway. Well, except for Blunt Force Trauma Zero Deaths edition. And I'm definitely not touching whatever that abomination is. So, let's wrap this up with everything we've learned from this experience. If you wanna know how good the dungeon boss actually is, try defeating him on Blunt Force Trauma and see how much that makes you hate your life. Force Shield is still the best passive skill in the game. And most importantly, Vandar's a little bitch. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Sub if you are starving for more Dragon Nest content. There aren't a lot of us left in the fandom, so like and comment if you're still here. Hope to see you next time. Peace out.